let's have a look at the tools that we're going to use for this class. If you haven't done any patchwork before, you can definitely take this class. So you may not be familiar with all the tools that I'm going to show you yet. This is my cutting mat. It's specifically designed for using with quilting. So it's resealable, which means that it works well with the rotary cutters. There are some craft mats around that are quite shiny. I wouldn't use those if possible because they will blunt your blade. So we've got the resealable cutting mat. We've got a rotary cutter. This is my Alpha Splash one that I like because it's very easy to change the blades. And make sure that you've got a new blade ready for your new project. You're also going to need some rulers. And we'll start with the straight rulers because everything in this class is cut from strips. So before we get the triangle ruler out, we're going to need to cut strips with a straight ruler. So something like this, a 6.5 by 12.5, or one of the larger ones will be fine for cutting your strips. You will also see me using this Creative Grid Stripology ruler. I've got a little one and I also have an extra large one. They're great because the rotary cutter blade actually goes in the slots, so you can control your strip sizes very easily. So the nitty-gritty of this class is the triangle ruler, and I do recommend the Creative Grids. They make them in an 8.5 or a 12.5. The 12.5 can make cutting some of the shapes for these blocks easier when they're longer like this, but it's a bit more clumsy than the 8.5. So for most people will work fine with the 8.5. I would definitely start with this one and maybe get a 12.5 later on if you want to. Christmas and birthdays are always good. But you can do everything without the 12.5. There will be instructions. It's really important to have a triangle that measures from top to bottom. There are some available that are for English paper piecing where shapes are measured along their sides, and we don't do that, we measure vertically. So that's essential. If you have got one already and it has a tip on it like this, a sharp tip, then you're going to need to amend some of your cutting directions very slightly, and I've got a note in the class about that. So we've got our triangle ruler. They've now made this which has my name on, which is very exciting, and this is the 1/2 ruler, which is great for cutting your setting triangles at the ends, and also if you're going to be doing any blocks with half shapes. I haven't included any in this class, but there are instructions in the design class for that. So if you're taking the design class, you might want to put some blocks in that have half triangles and things like that in. And this one comes in very handy for that. It allows you to cut your half shapes easily along a strip, so it just makes the whole job a lot easier. So that's for cutting, and I also recommend that you trim corners off some of your shapes when we're going to sew initially. I used one of these probably for the first whole quilt that I did at least. It helps you to line your shapes up, so if you trim corners of shapes using either something like this, the corner cut 60, or the tip of your Creative Grids ruler you can use as well, then that makes your piecing a lot easier. Good sharp pins are really important. These are very fine clover glass head patchwork pins. They make these extra fine ones and some fine ones, which both work great. This is a bowhin one, which is nice and fine. If you're used to your old pins that are quite big and clunky, I would suggest asking somebody, if it's present time, or treating yourself to some really nice fine patchwork pins. They make all the difference in the world. I have my little scissors, which I use for clipping off corners because we get lots of little tiny 1/4 inch triangles when we're sewing, and I have my little pot that I put them in just to keep things a bit tidy. And then finally I use this tool a lot, and this is the clover roll and press, and there are other roll and presses around available, and this is what I use for pressing the seams open as I'm going. Generally I press all my seams open as I go, and then I'll press the block when I'm finished, so there's less opportunity to warp my bias edges with the iron. And I will be showing you how I press carefully with the iron as well in the classes. So that's our tools set up, and once you've got those, you're going to be ready to start making some blocks.